In this video, I'm going to show you how you can take XGen hair and then make custom materials to do cool things and render it at the highest quality that you can at home right now and make hair like this, this, and this. Let's do it. Okay, hey, I'm Jay, and in this video we're going to be talking about XGen hair rendering using Arnold. Just want to get this out of the way. I don't want to be the hair channel. We did a lot of hair videos, but this is it. This is the ultimate. We've climbed the mountain to this point. In my opinion, hair rendering using Arnold is like the top tier. You can argue about what's better, you know, V-Ray or whatever, but this is used in Hollywood movies to do digital doubles on screen with real human beings. What more do you want? So we're going to get into how you can make custom materials or just custom nodes and edit the Arnold hair material, and how you can do some settings to make really nice renders of hair, really the top quality. This video is brought to you by Squarespace, so thank you to them, and a little bit more about them later on in the video. The cool thing about Arnold is it's so physical, it's calculating everything, and compared to the last renderers where we're talking about rendering hair more in a real-time setting, this is trying to calculate everything. So it takes a lot more time, know that going in. And at the end of the video, I'll give you a little bit more of my thoughts and feelings on the differences and why you would render in the different software. So far we've done rendering hair in Marmoset, Unreal Engine, and now we're gonna do Arnold. All right, so let's jump into Maya and get started. Okay, so here we are in Maya. You can see I made this sort of simple mesh, just this like backdrop box. I have this to just, you know, bounce light around really to make it a cleaner presentation where we're just focused on the hair. I've got this area light being my key, and I have this camera. I also have in my group here, I've got a skylight dome, and the dome has an HDRI attached to the color, and it's just something from HDRI Haven, which is a place where you can get free HDRI. So it doesn't really matter. It's just lifting the overall ambience in the scene, and it's doing it in a you know, believable, naturalistic way because it's done with a photograph. So you can download this particular one if you want, but it really doesn't matter. I just wanted something with a kind of skyline ground just so the hair would look more natural. But again, it doesn't really matter. Now, you don't need an HDRI in your scene, but I like to have one in the scene. It adds like colors and values, a lot more nuance, so it just ends up looking more natural. That's all we have for the scene setup. We got this key light, and you know, I'll show you something else a little later, but we'll jump over to a rendering view here so we can see things a little bit better. Okay, first really important point here. The hair that we're looking at and that we're gonna use at the first part of this video is an interactive groom. Now, in the last video where I demonstrated converting this to something that Unreal Engine can use, I showed you how you could convert your XGen groom to an interactive groom. There are several different ways that you can use XGen, and what I use to make hair is called spline primitives. Now that's where you use guide curves to guide all the spline primitives and use the procedural modifiers and stuff like that. Interactive groom is a different way. You can make hair that way, but it's a little buggy, and I just prefer the way I do it. It's super easy to convert, and when you do convert, it doesn't remove the original. So in the first part of this video, we're gonna shade that interactive groom because you can do more things with it much easier. And at the end of the video, I'll show you how you can still do some cool things, even if you wanted to keep your spline primitives. So you can see that I did a render before, and this is just the straight up material that you get when you're doing a groom. So, you know, we did this groom before, and we used the physical hair shader. So this is just the hair physical shader. This gets made when you create an XGen and it displays the hair correctly in Maya's viewport, which helps with grooming. But now we're gonna switch over and we're gonna start using Arnold shaders that are made for Arnold, and we have Arnold up now. Before I go further, people might wanna know what my render settings are. Not too crazy, really didn't change much. I've got this aspect ratio, and here are my samples. This might be a little bit high for this early of a stage, but what I'm doing is I have my test resolution set to 50%, so that's gonna speed things up a lot. And also, as you can see, it's gonna be noisy without a lot of high samples anyways, so I'm keeping it here. If we have to reduce it, we will. We'll just come down here and drop the camera samples probably. And then once we're really happy, you probably do a really high camera sample. Okay, so that's just the render setup. Now let's get into starting to make some materials. All we gotta do to start playing around with hair shaders is create one. We'll go to create Arnold shader surface, and then AI standard hair. This is the one right here. Boom, get rid of that. There you go. So here we go, AI standard hair, and we'll just call this AI hair, why don't we? So really out of the gate, this is gonna be really good. I can actually just throw it on here and show you. So I'll just select these two, Then I'll right click this and assign it. You can see it's black in the viewport. Some pros down in the comments left me some tips on how I can put the physical shader like in this thing or something, but I didn't figure that out and it's not a big enough deal for me to figure it out yet, but you can do that and that sounds cool. But right now we're keeping it basic. So here we'll just save this and we'll do this throughout the process so we can see. So I just saved a little snapshot. We'll bring it up here. Okay, it looks like the AI hair is black by default. You can come over to presets and you see they already got presets. So if we replaced it with a blonde preset, then we would get a different outcome. Okay, so here is our platinum blonde hair kind of default look. This is way too bright. But here you can see just out of the box what's going on, and you get really good quality specular models, diffuse models, and transmission that is very physically accurate for hair. That's what's really cool about this, and it's really simple to tweak. So if you look over here on the right side, these are the material parameters. You can see melanin here. This is how you control the color of the hair. If you don't know, melanin is what controls the pigment in the hair. The more melanin that there is in hair, the darker it is. So if someone has black hair, they have a lot of melanin. And this is extremely pale hair, right? And you can see it's set to 0.1. 0 would be white hair. So we can just set this up a little bit, you know, like, I don't know, 0.3, and you see, there we go. Now we're getting a different color. If I do a little box here. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And then there's melanin redness. So that's it. The melanin controls the value, and the redness kind of gives it that red shift, which in some people, you know, it would be heavier. Then there's melanin randomized, which is pretty cool. And that's kind of self-explanatory, but that'll vary it per hair. So that'll help make it a little bit more natural. Really, the only other thing that I do is I do enable this anisotropic roughness so that I can max out azimuthal roughness. I don't really still fully understand what this does. Be a good point for me to say that the documentation on this material, as with all Arnold stuff, is very good, and it's online at the website and it's free. I'll link it down below. You can check it out, but I'm referencing it constantly when I'm using Arnold. You can read a little bit about the azimuthal roughness, and they have a little like before and after, and I just prefer the look of this. Sometimes in Arnold, you can see like really glowy hair around the edges as the light transmits through it. So I don't know why you wouldn't use it. Could be personal preference. I might be breaking physical accuracy here. I don't know, but I prefer the look. So my projects, I always do this. Another thing that's interesting, by the way, is that the IOR, which stands for index of refraction, is that way that light interacts with objects, can be changed. And then there's a shift parameter. And on the site, in the documentation, it actually lists like the different ethnicities and their, you know, general values, which is pretty cool. So someone has done the research already and it's on there. So if you're trying to do a particular hair of a particular ethnicity, it might be on here, at least something similar to guide you in the right direction, and that would look more physically accurate. Okay, so here we go. We got blonde hair already done, but let's get a little bit more tricky. So honestly, out of the box, if you're just doing presentations, this is fine. This is essentially what I did when I was just showing the Groom before. You know, maybe like increase the randomness a little bit and you're good to go. But we can do some more things. So why don't we let this finish? We'll save it and then we'll start to add some more tricky things to our shader network. Okay, so it's done rendering. We'll save this now. And this little plus sign so we can see where we started, where we are now. So already maybe some interesting things that we can see. This looks a lot more plastic, and that's probably really because the light's not transmitting through. And then you can also see the specular model here, which is a little bit different. Obviously with a different color too, but it looks like the reflection is a little bit better. And the lightness, you can see how it brightens up. That's why this looks a little bit more plasticky. It's because the dark areas, the shadows are lifting because the light is actually scattering through the hairs, which is what's happening. In real life, hair is like a hollow tube and some complicated things are happening. So there's some pretty math that some really smart, nerdy people did for us that we can use to make our silly characters look super pretty. Maybe worth noting here, your XGen has to be in ribbon mode, but that's the default. So it's either ribbon or thick, you know, just leave it on ribbon. So it's probably on ribbon, so that's fine. But the shader's meant to do that. All right, so here's blonde. So now let's add some tricky stuff. Why don't we? All right, Squarespace. So really quick, I just want to give you my thoughts on Squarespace. You know it. Everyone knows it, right? It's an easy to use web builder to make your own custom websites or buy a domain. I'm looking to make my own website this year, and I'm doing it with Squarespace because you can get really good results, make a nice, clean, professional website, and it's super quick and easy. I've wasted a lot of time in the past and, you know, getting lost in the weeds, and I just like that I can drag and drop things around and get as fancy or as simple as I want. I also really like that I can put my digital products on there and start selling it from my own domain. And that's really easy to do too. I don't have to get like extra plugins or anything like that. And there's tons of different themes for like anything that you're trying to do. So if you are interested in making a website for your own work or your business that you want to start this year or whatever it is, check out Squarespace. You can go there right now and start a trial and build your site for free and play around. And then when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/jhill to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain to launch your own custom site. Okay, cool. So now let's add some stuff. Let's start off with something real basic. We'll just use a noise and plug it in and see what we get. So I'll type tab, AI noise. Here we go. So here we go. We have an AI noise. You can see that red means RGB, but you can just open it up and grab an R for the value. This is something that you do in Arnold all the time, just letting you know, because it might be a little bit odd to see it first. But we can plug this into melanin even. So check this out. We'll put it in here. And then if I come over here, I can go to, you have to click this so we can see the live render. If I hit render right now, you can see it's all borked. But if I go over here to look at the debug view, debug shading, I can do isolate selected. And now we can see our noise, right? So here's our noise. Cool. Not exactly what we wanted. So if we come over here, you can see coordinate space is object. If we set this to UV, now all of a sudden we got something different. Now if we up the scale here, now you see what's going on. Now we're starting to get these actual chunks, which is cool. So you can increase the octaves, and that's going to increase the variety. We could increase the contrast by dropping down la sonority. I don't know why I felt like sounding Spanish right there. La sonority, but I don't think that's right. La sonority? Yo, these words are crazy, dude. I'm not a scientist. But anyways, we dropped it. Now we got some crazy stuff, right? Just with this simple node, what we can do is we can play with this to change the contrast. And then we can also, right here with colors, we can change it. So remember, in this case, we're plugging this into the melanin value, right? So white would be 1, and that would mean it'd be black hair, right? So if we want to do in a middle, brown, blondish hair, that means it's got to be dropped down. And we don't want actual black, so we're going to lift this up, okay? So now instead of going here and going to the debug shading, you can actually press S. You see it's right there. So if I hit S, it'll show me, and then I can drop this. I can even do a really small box here. And if I start playing with this now, you'll see it get darker or lighter based on these colors right here. So you can see we got some variety now. If I do this, we'll let this go. All right, we're back here. We'll stop this, save this guy, and then we'll check it out. There we go. So if we flip back and forth, you can see, especially on this side, we'll have some areas that actually get darker, and then we have these lighter areas. So pretty simple. We just added a noise. We plugged that into melanin and started playing with it, and now we've got something that's pretty cool. Now let's show you another node. We'll take it a little bit further. In my material graph, why don't I just take this and put it into melanin redness for now. If I hold Alt and Shift, I can cut my first one, and then I can even add the contrast. So we're still going to have this noise, natural breakup kind of thing to make clumps look a little different. And then for melanin, we'll play around with a ramp. So if I come over here, I can look at AI ramp. We'll do an RGB. And we'll open this guy up, and we'll use R here too. So boom. Now if I come over here, start off a render and hit S. Now we can see our ramp. Now some things that we might need to change here. Pretty simple actually. It's already on V, good. It's already on linear, good. The only thing is use implicit UVs. We need that to be on. There you go. We got ramps. So now what we can do, if we hit this little button here, you get a nice big old ramp. So now what we do is say we want it to look like she has dyed hair, blonde hair or something, and she's showing roots. That would mean the roots are going to come up here, and then we want some contrast, right? So we'll do some contrast like this. That might be kind of cool like that. But remember, white is dark. So we're going to go real dark like that. And then for the blonde hair, we'll go really dark like this. So that'd be blonde hair. Now if we hit S, it should be good. Looks like it's too blonde. And then this is not dark enough apparently. All right, we'll save this. Probably don't need the comment section. So there you go, that's before. Now after, our color is changing because, we're doing a new melanin each time, but you can just see the roots take effect, which is pretty cool. We're getting a gradient which is super easy to control, you know, with this right here. So yeah, that's really cool. I use this a lot. I mean, you can do it subtly. I'm using really strong example here so you can see like a whole dyed root look or a roots coming in look. You could also do it subtly, which I think, you know, it's always worth doing. Just a nice gradient. You could do it for different dye colors. You can easily add any kind of stuff right here. You know, if you wanted to, just boom, you know, get another color right here. Boom, get another dark one right here. And you could do crazy dyes or something if you wanted to. So that's ramps. Now let's get a little bit more tricky. Now I'll try to do a little demo here where I'll show you making white hairs. I'm just going to show you kind of some random procedural stuff you can do in the shader and introduce you to some nodes that you may or may not already know about. All right, so the first node that we're going to show here is the AI utility node. You know, this node's cool. I use it for a bunch of stuff like presentations. You can use it for wires. You can get a different data essentially and use this node. What we're going to use it for is getting the primitive ID or the uniform ID. Doop. So now we're getting all the hairs as colors. So now what we want to do is remap this. So we'll do AI range. Now we have this RGB, just every hair is an RGB. And we need to remap this to grayscale. And then we're going to crunch it using the AI range. So far, a way I've found that we can do that is by using an AI ramp RGB like we did before to melanin. Actually, we can just straight go into the input here. Why not? And then we'll go out to melanin. What we have here is a ramp, right? Now we need to turn implicit UVs on again. That lets us do per strand. Right now we have a normal ramp like we did before, you know, where you can do like we were doing the roots. But if we change the type to custom, you can even come in here and like change the crunchiness of that, which is cool. So if I open this even more, like, you know, I can make less white hairs. But anyways, here we have a variety. Now per strand, which is what we want, because what we're trying to do here is have a few black hairs. Okay, now we're gonna use another node. Let's mix these together. So we've got our right here, this right here is our ramp we did for our initial kind of roots showing look. And now we've got this random white hairs thing. So now we want to add these together. So we're gonna use an AI layer RGB. Layer 1 will be our root to tip color. Layer 2 will be our mix of white hairs, and we'll enable layer 2, and then we'll change the operation. We want here, let's make this go to melanin, and here we have the result, and then we go to the range, and then this is all crazy. Okay, there was a bunch of black hairs. I'm just playing with a bunch of numbers here. Okay, so we got these. For AI layer RGB, I clicked clamp results right here. I set layer 1 to over and layer 2 to min. Let's see what happens if we go over. So if I set it to min, I'm assuming the blacks in this range are becoming the minimum value in this blend mode. And then we're getting this mix of hairs. So then if we undo the isolate, we take a look, we'll see what we get here. All right, so if you can see, we've got the root, and then we've also got these white hairs that are coming up. I'll just go ahead and do a render and then show you when it's done and we can compare. Here is our render of our latest setup here. Here it is, and then here it is before. So see, we introduced white hairs growing from the root. Maybe the blonde dye is like trying to touch it up. So this is another way you can add variety, some white hairs sprinkled in here. These nodes right here, like range and ramp, utility, it's an interesting one. And then using the layer RGBA, this is a good node to use in Arnold. We can use it for all kinds of stuff. We'll probably use it in like upcoming videos, but you can use it to layer all kinds of things, like graffiti on a wall, for instance, or makeup on a face. These are some nodes that you can use a lot. Now, next thing I want to show is we've done some procedural nodes and things like that. Now I want to show some custom stuff. So we're going to try to make a map that we can use to drive the color as if she had like a custom dye job or something. So this is something that could bring, you know, not only a lot of personality and interest, but like a very individualistic thing for your characters or anything you're working on. If you're doing creatures and stuff, this would be useful too. Okay, so we're gonna paint one real fast, and then I'm gonna plug it in, show you what you need to do to get this to have a custom color. So why don't we switch our view over here to, we could do modeling standard. Why don't we do modeling expert? Make it look nice and pretty for y'all. There we go. We don't need the backdrop right now. And we don't actually need the girl mesh. We're going to do this on the scalp mesh. Might be wondering why. Oh, and we don't need the hair, which is going to hopefully speed this up a lot. Yeah, the hair is what was heavy. Why am I going to do this on the scalp mesh and not the actual girl? Well, because Maya cannot use its paint tool on a mesh that has anything other than a Maya shader. So this has just like Lambert 1 on it, and the head will have an Arnold material. So you don't want to switch back and forth. And also your scalp mesh in a lot of projects, or it could come up that your scalp mesh has different UVs than your actual character mesh. So if we take a look at the UVs, we can see that they're all within 0 to 1. So we know we're going to be fine. If they were outside 0 to 1, it would also break Maya's paint tool. Okay, so here we are over in the modeling standard view, which we're all used to, so that I can come up here to texturing and then 3D paint tool. This is what we're going to use because it's going to create an IFF file. That's what we need. So why don't we come in here and we just click it? Why don't we? All right, boom. There's our tool settings. Okay, so we can probably start by filling it with a color. So why don't we do that? We'll go like this. Okay, assign edit textures. And I get this. I mean, we don't need it that big, but should we make it 2K? I guess so. I don't know. We don't need to though. And there we go. IFF. There we go. Assign it. Hey, now we're cooking. We'll open up our paint tool settings and then we'll fill it with white. Heck yeah, we'll hit save. You can see here it output the IFF. We need to remember this scalp mesh shape color. That's what we're gonna need. But here we go, it's white. And then why don't we just paint a little bit of blue or something? Yeah. Okay. And we'll just go like that. Yeah. Maybe we'll do a little bit of more. I don't know. If you hold B, you can change the size. This is the Maya paint tool. I don't know if you used it before, but it's kind of weird, but it can do some stuff. And then we'll do a little bit of pink. Okay. Then you got to hit save for it to write it on your disk. You can see down here, it's making it on the disk, right? Okay. So now we have this weird thing, but now we got to plug this in. So now that we just used the 3D paint tool and we painted a couple colors, now we saved it out as an IFF map. So now we have that on our disk. And now we just have to load it up into our shader network. Super pared down and basic now. So I can just do that by making a file texture node or searching for it in your textures in the browser because we made it in Maya. So if I were to come over here and go to my browser just to show you, and we went to textures, it would be one of the higher number textures. So like if I drag this down, here it is, scalp mesh color IFF. You can also browse over here on disk to find these, but here it is in our network. And that's it. You just have to go out color to base color. Base color in the Arnold hair shader is used for kind of non-physically accurate coloring. It works well to do as a hair dye. And you can think of it like if it's white, it's exactly the melanin value that you did before. So it's actually default is white. But if we start to add color, then it's going to mix together. So like blonde hair will take on the color a lot more than dark hair, for instance. So it is, similar to real hair dye in that way. And that's what we're going to be using it for. So we made a map that has mostly white and then we painted a little bit of colors. So now it's going to look like our hair has some colored streaks in it. So there you go. Now we've got some colored streaks in our hair. And you can see because like some of the hairs are in it, some of them aren't, it already creates kind of a complex look, which is cool. Now we have different ways to create variation with our hair, right? We can use noise and we can make that very granular and we can make it kind of large. We can use that to vary the roughness if we want. The melanin redness, we can use that for the melanin itself. And we can make ramps and use that for all kinds of stuff too. Now what's really cool is you can add this stuff together. So I'm gonna try to mix in some of the nodes that we used earlier on. So why don't I come over here and get a couple of these. So here's our ramp. And then why don't we get one of our noises too? Or here's our noise. Okay, so now we've got our ramp and we can put that back in melanin. So if we were to render and then do an isolation on this, what would we see? We'd see our root. Okay, cool. So we've got dark roots now. All right, so now we'll just create another noise. We'll increase this, we'll increase the scale. And then we'll change it to UV. And now, okay, now if this was plugged into the melanin, what will we get? All right, this is what we get right now, right? Kind of cool. We get some different streaks. Why don't we try to make this a lot more stark in contrast so we can see this mixed together, and we'll mix some of this together. We'll use our layer material again. We'll go AI layer RGBA, and then we'll do the ramp as input 1, and then we'll do the noise as input 2. And now the out color is going to go to melanin. So if we select this, we have isolate on. Here's our root to tip. Here is our noise, right? And we want to mix these together. So if we look at our layer RGB, we can enable layer 2 and then change the blend mode. Oh, cool. So I'm going to set it to minus. This is kind of cool. And then I can just kind of gradually bring that in. Nice. So that's going to be making some of the strips lighter. And then we can do more too in the noise. Like I can change the octaves to make it have more variation. But you can see now this is kind of cool how we're getting these like bigger clumps. And this isn't just like random per hair, right? Because now that we're using noise, we can change the scale. So that's making kind of chunks look different. So now we've got something a little bit more complicated. We've got the roots, we've got this noise breaking it up. And now we'll let this render finish and we'll see what this looks like. A little bit more interest by darkening it or lightening it a little bit so it gets darker towards the tip. I think that'd be nice. I'll get a nice little subtle difference here. And then why don't I up the samples a little bit? All right, cool. So here we have what we have so far, right? If we take a look, we have some root to tip action with the gradient. We have this, you know, looks like the dye of her hair is grown in. We have a gradient along it because why not? We can just add a little bit of extra on there. Then we've got the noise to break it up into chunks. We've got the per hair strand melanin randomness, which is just in the hair material by default that you can play with. And then we have a custom IFF map that's driving this hair dye color that we made using the 3D paint tool. So this is like all the little nodes and tricks combined together. With these tools, I think you could achieve pretty much any hairstyle that you want. All right, so far we've been shading and rendering an interactive groom. But what if you want to make a material and render a spline primitives groom, which is how I usually make hair to begin with? If your groom was interactive groom, so like if you started your groom with interactive groom, that would be fine. Or if you converted it, like you can see here on the left in my scene, we had these interactive grooms that we just converted, right? Using the XGen panel, convert to interactive groom. You could just convert your groom to interactive groom and just plug a texture map right into base color and it's gonna work. But then you can't edit your groom. So it depends. If you're done and you're locked on it, great. Just probably do that. It's easy. But if you wanted to do it on the other guide-based XGen, like the OG one, you'd have to do a couple more steps. So let's go back to the spline primitive version of this groom. Here we have it here. Now in the XGen settings, you'll have to add a custom shader parameter. You're gonna add a color parameter and then you're gonna name it whatever you want. In my case, hair dye. Once it's created, I'll need to create a map, and it doesn't matter. You just need to get it on disk and have it hooked up. So you just click the map and then save it. It doesn't matter if it's all white. Then you're going to track down that texture in the browser and you pull it up and then you can just point to the one that you painted to. So you're kind of tricking it. Once the file for your custom parameter is pointed to the painted file that you want, then in your hypergraph, you're going to make a node called AI user data color. And then in that node, you'll type in the name of your custom parameter. That's going to be getting the map info. And then that's what's plugged into base color. And then you get what we see here. You can also edit these paint maps in Photoshop, and this technique of making a color parameter and painting a custom map in Photoshop is the techniques I used when I did my Cyberpunk girl. It's also worth noting that you can't use the noise in the same way that we did with the interactive groom. I think interactive groom makes UVs in a different way. So like I say, if your hairstyle is locked, it's probably easiest to just convert it. But if you wanted to keep it dynamic and you're doing a spline primitive based groom, this is how you do it. Before we go, I wanted to do a quick little thing to show you just one of the many reasons why rendering hair in Arnold is so cool, because it's so physical. You can do a lot of interesting things with it, with your lighting, with your setup, and you just get a lot of complex interactions with the light because of the physicality of the render. So I'm going to turn on our backlight. Maybe we'll drop the key light down a touch. And we'll render this. All right, so this is what our backscattering looks like. Now, obviously, a lot of noise, but you can see how cool it is that the light comes scattering through, right? I just have a big area light behind the hair here, and I dim down the key light. So we see the light wrapping around, you know, it kind of glowing through these strands right here on the side of her head, and then it's blocked. We get the bounce light. I'll render a big resolution clean one that I can show you guys right now. And a couple other examples I did, just playing with the things we already did, painting a new custom color map. I made this style. And then this one is just purely ramps, no custom paint textures at all. So lots of cool things you can do. Once the material is established, you can just kind of move the light around wherever you want, change things up, and it's going to look really good. You get all of this advanced kind of shading and simulation for free, essentially, if you use Arnold and their material. That's what's so cool about it, is I feel like with very kind of little input and work, we can make really complex, naturalistic things happen. I'm gonna do a big old render right now, I think. I'm gonna change this to 100, and then I'm gonna make this 10, I guess. And here are a couple of the renders of our hair material. All right, that's how you can use Arnold to render XGen and do some really cool stuff. I hope you learned something. This is the last of the hair videos. The next video coming up in this series, where I'm demoing a bunch of workflows, is going to be the final fancy render in Arnold. Maybe we'll do an Unreal video on rendering a presentation with a character like that, more in real time. If you want to see that, let me know in the comments below. But we're going to do a big fancy Arnold render coming up, show you some more nodes and how we can do skin and such. Before I go, I wanted to answer the question that I get sometimes down here in the comments, is people asking why to use certain renderers to use certain things. I've covered all the renderers now doing high quality hair. We did Marmoset, we did Unreal, and now we did Arnold. This is my general breakdown of why you would choose what renderer. If you're going after speed and ease of use, Marmoset Toolbag I think is the choice, but it costs a little bit of money. Unreal Engine is fast, really nice, high quality, real time again, kind of even faster than Marmoset in terms of rendering, and you can render hair curves instead of geometry. Marmoset can't render curves yet, so you have to render geometry. But Unreal's a little bit more steps. It's got a learning curve. It's not as easy to use as Marmoset, but it's an industry standard. And then if you're after just the highest quality possible, doesn't matter how long it takes, Arnold I think is the way to go. And if you're doing your Groom in XGen, in Maya, you know, you're in the same program already. They work very well together. And if you're just into like VFX or doing any kind of offline rendering, digital double type stuff like that, that kind of quality, that kind of rendering, Arnold's definitely a way to go. You get the best quality possible. It just takes a long time. So those are my thoughts on what to pick for what kinds of projects. Definitely when I'm thinking about quality as the most important thing, I'll choose Arnold and do some of the things we did in this video. Hopefully you learned something, and if you did, let me know. I'd love to see it. That's it for this video. Thank you for watching up to this point. I'll see you in the next one. Now go make something cool. Peace.